Tonight, I'd like to talk about Buddhism. Buddhism is a structured methodology to bring you to enlightenment. It is a path that was founded by Buddha, an enlightened teacher. Someone who was able to figure out a repeatable way for a sentient being to become liberated. So Buddha was kind of like a guide. He knew the way to attainment of nirvana. He knew a way out of the suffering of self. And so he showed people the way. So Buddhism is that way. It's simply the way to liberation, but it's a particular way. It comes from Buddha's life experiences. So Buddha, before he was Buddha, Prince Siddhartha, was a prince in North India, and he became dissatisfied with life. He saw that there was suffering, that there was disease, decay, old age, and eventually death. And from this understanding of transience, from the understanding that life was basically suffering, he sought a way out of the transience, a way out of the suffering. And he went and he meditated. He mastered all of the spiritual practices around, but they didn't bring him to ultimate liberation. And then he finally found a way called the middle way, a path where you're in perfect harmony with life. You're not pushing too hard. You're not too relaxed. You come to a place of spiritual balance. And in this experience, in this realization, he found ultimate freedom. He found complete enlightenment. So he created this path for others. He said, hey, I found the way, and here's how you can do it too. So not only was he able to have the experience of enlightenment for himself, but he knew how to show others the same thing. Not everyone can do that. Some people just find a power or have some sort of success or some sort of realization for themselves, but they can't tell other people how to do it. It takes someone who's got a very strong mind for structures to be able to show somebody else how to be able to do what they've accomplished. And this is talking in the inner worlds. So it's kind of like if there were a mountain. Enlightenment is a mountain. Buddha found a way up. And, then what he did was he created a path. So if you're a mountaineer, you know the mountains, then you might be able to find your way up a mountain and come back down and tell someone, hey, I went to the top. It's beautiful up there. But what Buddhism is it's, that path. So he not only went to the top, but he also created, did the work to trailblaze a path that other people could follow. So Buddhism is this inner path. But it's very specific. It's very structured. It's very exact. And it's very helpful because you might not be such a strong mountaineer. It takes a lot of lifetimes to develop those skills. So without a path, you wouldn't make it to the top of the mountain. You might not make it You might get lost and go spinning around the mountain, never getting higher. So there's a great opportunity in having Buddhism, the pathway to enlightenment that was created by a enlightened master. Now, in Buddhism, we seek something ineffable, something beyond the physical, beyond any idea. See, Buddhism is not a religion. In a religion, they say, oh, don't do this or you're going to go to hell. Something bad's going to happen to you. And then they say, oh, do this, do the right stuff, and then you go to heaven. Heaven, hell, the Western paradise, something good, something bad. In Buddhism, we see beyond that. Because we see that if we went to heaven, we'd get stuck in heaven. We'd say, oh, okay, this is comfortable. I'm okay for now. But eventually you're sitting on these clouds with your little harp, and heaven sounds boring. You know, this definition of you got your little wings and your harp. And eventually you would get bored. Or you would die. Eventually the universe ends, and then you say, how can I die? I'm in heaven. And heaven's destroyed. Somehow, even we know in our hearts, even heaven is not enough. That's still a limitation. And there we just get comfortable. And then we forget the truth of life, the transience of life, that there's suffering in life. And then when we do experience change, we suffer all the more. So we're not just looking for an easy life. In Buddhism, we would embrace difficulty. We're not just running away from hardship. If difficult things happen, we want to be able to handle it. Because that tells us the truth of life. Life can be hard. Life can be difficult. We want to be able to face hardship and still draw our mind to a higher truth, to enlightenment, beyond heaven and hell. So, in Buddhism, we're not just trying to get to a comfortable state, and we're not just trying to avoid difficulty. We're trying to go beyond these concepts to that which is the greatest truth of life, enlightenment, something beyond ideas. We want to be able to face the hardest things in life. If you can face the hardest things in life, then you're not afraid. Then you know that you're strong. Then you're balanced in life. Because if you're afraid of life, afraid of things in life, and you're always trying to avoid them, you don't want to deal with them, then you're not strong. You can't handle it. We want to be able to handle life. We want to enjoy the good. We want to be able to deal with the bad and marry the ugly. Just kidding. So we want to be able to deal with life's ups and downs with balance, always seeking something beyond the transient, seeking something ineffable, the ineffable, essential energy, spirit of eternity. That's what we seek. So Buddhism is not a religion. Some people made it into one. There's temples and people go and pray to Buddha. Buddha, give me stuff, right? You keep stuff away, and that's what a religion is. Give me stuff means give me heaven. Take stuff away, that means take away hell. I can't deal with it, don't want to deal with it. But that's not looking for enlightenment. Enlightenment is beyond that. We seek enlightenment. Buddhism is a philosophy in that people can talk about it and think about it and have some interesting ideas. But Buddhism isn't a philosophy. It's just made into a philosophy by philosophers. Buddhism originally is a way of life. What Buddha taught is how to live in a way that directs you not to just good and away from bad, but to enlightenment. That which brings you into a condition of knowledge, of truth, of life, beyond good and bad. The Buddhist monks in the time of Buddha, they dealt with hardship. They just dealt with it where they directed their mind to enlightenment, and they had equanimity in the physical. But they were seeking not just to get out to a heaven world or something. They were seeking to know life in its true reality. This is Buddhism, and it's not by chanting. It's not by sutras. It's not by any structures. It's by observing something more subtle. It's the way. Buddhism, a spiritual inquiry, seeking enlightenment. Buddhism is a way of life, a way of being. It's an aesthetic of spiritual inquiry. And it's a way that brings you into understanding life in a greater truth. And then it brings you into a greater balance. So Buddhism is a way of being, a way of observing life. It's a way of seeing, looking for truth. It's a way of understanding your own mind in balanced ways that lead to empowerment and insight, understanding, and wisdom. So Buddhism is simply living life with a greater awareness of truth that yields a greater awareness of truth. In Buddhism, there's what they call the long path and the short path. The long path is the path of rules, of religious observances, of the sutras, the scriptures, of understanding, of chanting, of praying. And this isn't what Buddha taught. Although he taught some rules, he more taught an etiquette, a way of regarding life, of regarding people. But these etiquettes became rules eventually, the long path, the religious observance. And in the long path, it's a long way around the mountain up to the top. But really Buddha taught you can become enlightened in this lifetime. Buddhism in its true form, in its essential form, the way Buddha taught it is that you can become enlightened in this lifetime, without a doubt. Follow the teachings and you'll become enlightened. So this is the beautiful truth of Buddhism. Buddha didn't talk about a long path and a slow path. He talked about enlightenment now. But it became a slow path the more people thought about it and created, the idol of Buddha and saw Buddha as God versus just a person who became awake to eternity. So we seek to follow the essence of Buddhism, what Buddha originally taught, which is the pathway to enlightenment now. It is a way of meditation. It's a way of yoga. It's a way of mindfulness. It's a way of understanding your mind, looking at your mind, seeing what's there, following Buddha's path, that inner regard for the way that this master has shown to ascend beyond the places that one can be stuck. And in this inner inquiry, to see the truth, to know enlightenment, we find enlightenment. Buddhism is an inquiry. No one expects the Buddhist Inquisition. Buddhism Buddhism has very profound teachings, the inner teachings. So on the long path, you could say that there's the exoteric teachings. They wrote down what Buddha said, they put into books. You could read the books and understand the books. I love reading the books, they're great. But there's a difference between just understanding the words and understanding the spirit. The spirit is conveyed only through the teacher. That's the esoteric teachings. Because I read these sutras, I love them, where Buddha gave a teaching, and it's written down very clearly, it's insightful, and it's beautiful. And then in that teaching, one or two of his monks become enlightened. And now, hundreds of thousands of monks read that same teaching and no one becomes enlightened. It's because the enlightened teacher not only says the words, but transfers light, transfers spiritual insight. There was a beautiful teaching of Buddha and Sariputra, and they were just sitting out in a field, and Buddha picks a flower. Doesn't say anything, but he picks a flower, and in that picking of a flower, he's bringing an esoteric teaching. And all the monks didn't really get it. They didn't really see. They didn't have an awareness. But Sariputra received the teaching, and that's when he became enlightened. Right then and there, because of an inner teaching. The esoteric teachings, the secret teachings, might not have words. Sometimes they do. But if you just know the words, they don't do anything. It doesn't work. So in Buddhism, it's very important to have the enlightened teacher, the esoteric teacher, the teacher that can transmit through the structures of Buddhism, it's part of the path, transmit knowledge, transmit light, transmit power. You can transmit spiritual power. There's ways and methods. If you've got a lot, there's ways and methods that you can transmit it to others. It's kind of like if there was a rich man, he can give another man money. Here you go. I've got a bunch of money, and now I give it to you. So this is a very important aspect of the Buddhist path, the esoteric teachings, the transmissions. And then when you're given this power, when you're given this spiritual knowledge, you're elevated, you're stronger, you're more aware of how to meditate, how to be mindful, how to move past your karmas, your confusions, your delusions. It's very important to learn to get beyond desire and aversion, but we're in a society that has tremendous desire. And if you're always stuck in your desire, then really what you're following is your pathway to enlightenment versus Buddha's. Yeah. Desire is your way. You go, hey, I want to do this. You might want to, make money, buy a car, get a girlfriend, have a kid. Whatever you want to do, that's the way of you, the way of yourself, the way of your karma. And it will produce exactly where you are now. The karma of following your desires will be that you'll have more desires, and that you'll still want things, still be unfulfilled by things. So we seek to let go of following our path to our dissatisfaction, to our suffering. And we really seek to be neutral. Neutral is yielding desire. It's bringing your mind into the higher dimensions of light that are transmitted in meditation with the enlightened teacher. And then you see higher ways of being. You learn how to be mindful, compassionate, spiritually empowered. And you're able to act in ways of dharma, of truth, instead of ways of self. This is following the enlightened path, the enlightened master's pathway to enlightenment versus the self way. So enlightenment is attainable in this lifetime by following the pathway, Buddhism. And when we look at our lives month by month as we practice Buddhism, we can see that our lives get better. We can see that we're, not that our outer lives necessarily get better. We don't like become a Buddhist and then say, wow, I got a Corvette. Oh, wow, I got this. You're not, gifted random stuff by the universe. Right? We might even have hardship. We might face difficulty. However, whatever we face, we're able to face it in a more balanced way, with a greater knowledge of life, a greater perspective of how things are. And then you're able to see that you're more aware, you're more conscious. You are able to deal with difficulty better. That your mind is more quiet, that you see more joy and beauty in life. So when you're on the Buddhist path, it's a path of ascending spirit. And you can see in the beginning, month by month, after a while, week by week, and when you're advanced, it's every day, every meditation. You can see that your life is brighter, that it's more beautiful. And even dealing with hardship, we can deal with difficulties. Buddhism is not this, run away, be on top of a mountain, and be some master in some blissed out state. It's really dealing with life successfully. Buddha himself had difficulties. I remember one time he goes to a town to teach Buddhism, and some Brahmin comes out and yells at him, and he's totally just saying the worst things, totally insulting him. And Buddha just deals with it. He doesn't get upset at all. He's got perfect equanimity, even though he's got someone attacking him verbally. And then Buddha just, walks on. And then the man says, "Doesn't this bother you? I'm trying to get your goat here." And then Buddha says, "No, not at all. What you're giving to me, I'm not accepting. If you give me a present of food, of prasad, and if I don't accept it and I leave, what would you do? That you'd have all this food, you'd eat it, right? This is a present that you're giving me and I'm not accepting, so you're the one who's stuck with it." So in Buddhism, it's really important. We learn to deal with hardships. We don't just go to some little, cave and sit in a Himalayan cave meditating. That's fun for a little while. But we are able to deal with all of life and difficulties with people. Buddha's own cousin, Devadatta, he went behind Buddha's back and he told a bunch of monks, "Buddha's actually not cool. I'm cool," right? So he had like this showdown with Buddha, And he came up with all of these things like, you're not good because, you don't fast, and, you should, fasting is really spiritual. And he came up with all these things. He's all, look, and I do those things. And so then he convinced 500 monks to leave Buddha and go study with him, study being a weirdo. And then, off the pathway to enlightenment, and Devadatta was not enlightened. So it was onto the path of some other guy who says he knows the way up the mountain, who really doesn't. He knows the way to get into trouble, into danger on the mountain. So that was a bad path. But Buddha simply sat there, and when his cousin passionately would argue with him, he would just speak the truth. And then when his cousin leaves with 500 monks, Buddha's like, okay. If that's what, it's like, he's not sitting there going, oh, darn, my way is better, and I'm going to show you. Buddha spoke the truth, but not everybody hears the truth. See, in Buddhism, we're not out there trying to get a following. We're not out there trying to sell it. Really, if somebody hears the teachings of Buddhism and they recognize it, they are a sophisticated soul. They are ready for Buddhism. If they listen to, Devadatta over the Buddha, if that's what resonates with them, then that's something that they experience. But the enlightened teachings in Buddhism, they're not something that Buddha was trying to sell. He just said them, and if he shared the way, and if they were advanced enough, they saw that, and they followed it. That's how it is. You're not out there saying, oh, I got a sales pitch, let me give it to you, benefit, benefit, benefit. Competition, here's what's bad about them. Boom, boom, boom. I've got customer references, like here, there's a new clear light of reality. It's newer and clearer with 25% more free. Yeah, right? So Buddhism isn't this this weird thing. It's simply the teachings of truth, the pathway to enlightenment. And if one hears it and they recognize that, then they're ready for Buddhism. Otherwise, they're out there in the world. So Buddhism is a beautiful thing. It's an amazing thing that was created in the selfless giving of a fully enlightened master. And over the centuries, it's been changed, altered, recodified by other saints and other enlightened beings who had deeper insight within the structure of Buddha's original teachings. And that's where we get Zen from, Bodhidharma. That's where we get Mahayana Buddhism from. It's the shifting, the changing. Tantra is another aspect of Buddhism with the insight of Padmasambhava. So Buddhism is not just exactly what Buddha taught. It's the pathway to enlightenment that many, many enlightened masters added to. And by us following it, we're able to get higher, get brighter. And if we do it well, become enlightened. And that's Buddhism. Thank you.